Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode number 92, with today's guest, Matthew Pollard.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. I will be taking you behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments so that I can show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. Now, this show is brought to you by our book of the same name, which is Web Marketing That Works, and the gift for you, the listener, is the bonus 33 free marketing templates. So you can get your hands on those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, today's guest is Matthew Pollard. He is the host of a podcast called The Better Business Coach, and he's a fellow Aussie, but he is now based over in Austin, Texas. He has 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories to his name in a vast array of industries. And just like everybody else, Matt has been through some personal hardships himself due to a disability. Matthew had the reading speed of a 6th grader at the age of 18, which he talks briefly about on the podcast. And this resulted in introversion and an extreme lack of confidence. He actually also fell victim to a glassing to the face, which took 26 stitches, painful plastic surgery, and more than 5 years to heal. But he hasn't let these misfortunes hold him back. Matthew's used them to learn and turn them into advantages that he now shares with others. So as well as the podcast called Better Business Coach, he has been featured in the book Successful Men in Business, which was published in 2014, and he's also been the gracious recipient of the prestigious Young Achiever Award by the Melbourne Business Awards. There's plenty going on with Matt. He is known as the rapid growth guy, and we dive into that concept in the podcast. So just a quick note before we get into the show, I was recording this overseas in Bali, and there is a little bit of traffic noise when I'm talking. So if you're offended by some background traffic noise of a few scooters going past, then probably skip this show. But that said, everything when Matt's talking is perfectly quiet because I muted my end of the microphone. But just a slight word of warning, we should be able to edit most of it out, but just want to be clear with you at the start. So let's get straight into the show with Matthew Pollard. My name's Adam Franklin, and I am joined on the line by Matthew Pollard. How are you, mate?
I'm doing very well, mate. Yourself?
Really well, thank you. Now, you are known as the rapid growth guy. Can you give us a bit of an overview of how you help business owners and people in general?
Well, I guess predominantly what I do is I help customers leverage their business to obtain rapid growth. So what I predominantly work in is niche marketing, differentiation, unified message, and sales systemization. And the reason for that is that I find a lot of businesses, they're very good at doing the skill or the functional part of what they do day to day, but they really struggle with taking their business to the next level or getting out of that what I do every single day and what I've done for the last 10 years. So what I do is I come in as an external consultant, if you like, and I help them look at what their business could actually achieve if they stepped into new markets, if they stopped trying to tell people that they did everything and unified that message to focus on one specific thing first, and then created a sales system so that they could actually spend more money on marketing because they knew that they'd get guaranteed results at the back end.
Okay, and now you've been very prolific with your web marketing. What's your philosophy on web marketing?
So I think that web marketing is very, very similar to your bricks and mortar company. And I think that you'll find that there's a lot of experts that talk about web marketing, and then there's a lot of experts that talk about face-to-face sales and marketing, and they almost consider it two separate topics. But if you chunk up to a higher level, it's all the same thing. When you're trying to get a reader interested in what you do, whether it be through an article, a podcast, a webinar, an email, whatever you're trying to achieve, the top of the tree, if you like, is what specifically differentiates you from every single email, web article, podcast, webinar that they've seen in the last 2 years. Because what happens, and I'm sure you've done it, you get an email in your inbox and you're like, well, it kind of looks like everything else, delete. You don't even think. And then all of a sudden you find yourself reading an email and you're 4 paragraphs down or 4 lines down, because obviously most emails are very short and concise. And they've got you on the hook. And the difference is that they've said something in a different way, or they've spoken to you about something or a product or service that's slightly different to what you've come to expect. And that gets you your interest. It piques your interest. The next thing is that you've got to stop trying to sell to everybody and speaking to everybody, because by doing that, you really speak to nobody. Because if your message is so bland, of course it's going to blend into everyone else. So you really want to focus on the groups of individuals that you can speak to, that you can specialize in. And by doing that, you have less competition and you can speak directly to their wants and needs.
So Matthew, of all the things you've done, both yourself and potentially with clients, what's worked really well for you?
Well, again, what I really focused on always is challenging industries that are highly saturated. So my first business was telecommunications, and this was a business in Australia, and we became, within the first 3 years, and I opened it when I was 19, it became the fastest growing and the largest B2B mobile company for business-to-business mobiles in the country. And the reason why it grew is it was around the time where the market was getting saturated, but everybody was just focusing on call rates and no one was focusing on service anymore. And a lot of sales consultants would walk door to door and they'd sell predominantly just on call rates. And no one would actually show what those call rates meant to their overall bill. So we opened up a business that focused on doing a full bill analysis, even if they were a small mum and pop shop, if you like. And we do a full bill analysis to show that they'd save $10 a month. And if that was $10 a month, we talk about it annually and it'd be $120 a year. It still sounded like a lot of money. We'd convert them. But the best thing that we did was that we would talk to them about the fact that whether we put them with whatever supplier, they would call us directly for customer service. And that's a true niche of business owners that wanted a specific service that they couldn't get anymore. We found an unmet need, and that's what we did. We delivered on it. My last business that I was involved in was education. And what we realized was that anybody that had a degree who wanted to further their education would go and do a master's qualification. Anyone that was in the trade demographic, however, would a lot of the schools or a lot of the RTOs, recognized training institutes, were focusing on delivering trade-based skill sets to make them better at their trade. What we realized, though, is the true entrepreneurs were the ones that opened up their own businesses, and they needed help running their business. They needed soft skill training, how to manage staff, how to manage their finances as well, how to handle marketing through the peaks and troughs and manage your staff right through that, how to do budgets and financial plans, and no one was providing that. So what we did is, again, we focused on a differentiated message. We focused within the trade demographic to give them those soft skills, but we had business coaches because they wanted business coaches, but they couldn't afford them. And they had a view because they didn't like school. That's generally why most people go into trade qualifications. They wanted to be taught by a business coach, not by a teacher. So by offering those two differentiated messages, we picked up the whole trade demographic, which was a whole niche to our own, really. We very much, for the first year and a bit, we had no real competition. And then after that, we moved into other sectors straight after.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, mate, what hasn't worked well? What's failed, or what might you do differently based on all of your experiences?
So I think the main thing that I learned, and I learned this at a very young age, where when I started in telecommunications, my belief was, and we first started with just bill analysis, and by providing bill analysis, that really was enough to start getting customers to sign up and move towards our products and services. Very soon after that, we started to work on different products and offering the customer service. The mistake I made was believing that once you figure out a niche or a point of differentiation, that you can really rest on your laurels and that's all you need to do forever. The truth of it is that what you need to do is focus on every 6 months looking about whether or not that is still giving you a competitive advantage, or if it's not. And if it is giving you a competitive advantage, you obviously solidify that and increase your marketing. If it's stopped giving you a competitive advantage, and this could be because there are new entrants into the market, there are people offering other products and services, maybe technology's changed, maybe government legislation's changed. You need to refocus as if it's a whole new business and look at what new message you can provide, what new niches you can go into. Otherwise, 6 months, 12 months down the track, you can find yourself not making the profit. You're not having that rapid growth. And look, I learned that in the first 18 months when companies started copying what I did. At first, I got upset with it. And obviously, I know now that if people are copying you, it's the biggest compliment. However, it doesn't really help you when they're starting to take your market share. What you need to do is you need to constantly readdress and constantly focus on doing what they can't. See, in a lot of cases, they'll copy you if you're doing really, really well. And your true benefit, or what's going to accelerate your success over them, is your ability to continually evolve into new and substantial niches, creating new and differentiated messages on the flip of a coin if you need to.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me of that quote that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But again, as you say,
so true.
Pretty frustrating if it is chewing into your market share and your profits, but good technique there for staying ahead of the copycats.
Look, a lot of people tell you not to recreate your own idea or a new idea, but to copy something that's already pre-existing in another country or another market space. However, a lot of people don't travel. Like, I know you're overseas at the moment working remotely, but a lot of people don't travel like you do. A lot of people stay in the same postcodes, the same suburbs that they grew up in. So the only thing that they can copy and mimic is the business that's successful next door. And frequently, that was my business because we were a national business and we had all these smaller players that were trying to copy what we did. And whether it was the large corporates that were copying us because they were copying us as well, or the small businesses, regardless, my market share was shrinking. And the best lesson you can learn is as soon as you're succeeding, know that people will copy, preempt that, and just book it in your calendar. Once every 6 months, just readdress what's the message I'm sending, what niches am I targeting, and is my market share growing, shrinking, or are people copying me? If so, readdress and go again.
Now, Matthew, have there been any absolute, dead set shockers that you've come across in terms of marketing activity?
Well, I think the biggest mistake I made was somebody sold me the idea a long time ago that if I put a $5,000 advertisement in a magazine, then that was going to increase sales. And what I did is I just put an article in, I got the people in our office to write it and publish it. And that was my first attempt at written form media. Up until then, I focused on telemarketing, which is all talking and communicating and actually having a two-way conversation with somebody. What I had to learn, and I know your website's very, very strong on teaching people how to do this, but teaching people how to have a one-way communication, but constantly trying to entice them to start a two-way dialogue. And that was something that I had to learn. And I think that's a strategy that a lot of people don't appreciate the true value of. And for me, I learned my lesson by dropping $5,000 on an ad when I was very young and realizing that it was written like an advertisement of why my company is so awesome, but not written like a why it would be awesome for them to contact me, connect with me in some way. And I think that was probably one of the biggest clangers I ever made.
I can certainly appreciate that, Matt, and nothing gets old faster than a $5,000 advert that doesn't convert as well as you'd like. Now, you made some good point there about the two-way dialogue, and that's, I think, part of the key of web marketing is that you can have these conversations with people, but those conversations are difficult to scale, and that scares a lot of people off because you can only talk to one person at a time, particularly if you're actually having a genuine conversation with them. But what people need to realize is that you are actually demonstrating that you care, that you listen, and that you've got their best interest at heart. So these two-way conversations are such an opportunity for us, and even things as simple as replying to emails or replying to your, people reply to your newsletter, reply back. People don't do that. People ignore all of those replies, or they don't even ask for replies. And so when people actually get a response from you personally off a newsletter, then that's one of the easiest, simplest ways to actually build that, strengthen that connection with your readers. So Matt, next question is, if you're starting your web marketing from scratch, what would you do first?
So I think the most important thing is to focus on testing a principle first. I mean, I'm a judge at a lot of the local Angel Hack and Google startup events. And I think that people don't have to start the way I started, which was really throwing your hat in and giving it a go. What you can do is you can really test an idea or a principle. And the great thing about these events is they're everywhere in the world. There's some in Sydney, there's some in Melbourne, there's some in Austin, Texas, where I am. And what I would really do is take myself to one of those events. It's a great opportunity to meet and network with developers, other marketing people, depending on what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also really start to break down the barrier, because I think a lot of people have in their head that it's going to take 2 years to start a business. They've got to quit their job and really build it for the next 2 years. Now, sure, that's the case sometimes. I mean, I'm launching 4 books by the end of the year. I've got a new plugin that focuses on creating a sales script in a more efficient way. And these business opportunities can take a lot of time. But other times, and I've seen this happen, people have created unbelievable ideas in as less time as 48 hours. And it really helps demystify people to the belief that they don't actually need to chuck their job, and they don't really need to dedicate 2 years before they start trying to earn an income. The next thing I would really do is I would start aligning myself with a group of mentors. And one of the things that I think is fantastic, and look, I spent a lot of my time learning off YouTube when I first learned how to sell. I mean, I was an introverted kid that had a reading speed of a 6th grader when I graduated from high school, who somehow made their way into door-to-door sales because the company that I had a job lined up for went broke before Christmas, and it was the only job I could get. And I learned through YouTube. These days, you've got podcasts, you've got webinars, you've got so many different online forms that you can access information from. And my suggestion is always to listen to as much and a plethora of different people as you can until you find somebody that you can get behind, and then follow their advice or their strategy towards success, because their strategies obviously worked for them, and then run your ideas and what your business concepts are through that strategy, and don't question it, just move forward. Because I think a lot of people lose their energy halfway through or halfway on the trajectory to success, because it's like climbing Mount Everest, but once you get to the top, it's worth it. Most people give up at about 98%. So you really need that mentor, and to be able to have something to trust and follow along the way.
Nice. You mentioned just getting started and getting into it, and there's a great book called The 7-Day Startup by a fellow Aussie, Dan Norris, who's been a guest on this podcast. But his book, 7-Day Startup, is totally well worth the read if you are looking to start up a business. And your point about YouTube, I mean, everything you want to learn is on YouTube. It may not be quite as organized and as easy to access, say, as like an online course that you might pay for, but literally the same information is available on YouTube if you want to go digging around and find it. So there's certainly so many resources teaching you everything. As you said, you learnt selling off YouTube. It's the same for any topic you could want to learn about. So great tips there.
Knowing Dan Norris personally, I also know he offers a huge amount of great content online. And look, I'm happy to say if you type in startup in Amazon now, he's number 2 above other books that have been well publicized. And I think one of the major tricks to his success was that he gave away so much, just like a lot of great mentors do. They give away so much information. And as a new startup business, you can't afford to be paying $20,000 for this mentor, $10,000 for that seminar until you know you're making the right decision. So by following all the people's free content and then investing in something as simple as a book to learn those strategies, it offers a huge swagger of being able to understand a system and a process. And I think a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they just assume they can do it. And while that may be true, there's a reason why 95% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. And they fail not because their idea isn't any good. It's just you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, and you don't have those resources. I mean, if I knew what I knew now when I first started my first business, I would have added a 0 behind the profitability of that business. And a lot of people just starting out, they get caught up in the work and the day-to-day, and they don't push forward with what's going to make them the most success.
So Matt, what marketing activity brings you the most joy? I mean, you're prolific with your blogging and your podcasting and videos. What do you enjoy the most and why?
I think that what I had when I first started is probably why I get the most joy out of what I do now, which is the podcasting. I've got a podcast of my own, which you know, you've been a guest on my show as well, and thank you for that. And you provided a huge amount of value. And one of the things that I really like is that when I was growing up, I didn't exactly grow up rich. I was definitely not, I didn't have the silver spoon, if you like. And I had a lot of mentors that supported me and helped me when they probably shouldn't. I definitely didn't have the money to pay them. They just offered me a lot of value and a lot of advice. And that was because I interacted like I suggest to my clients to do. I interacted with their blogs. I interacted with their YouTube channels, and I asked questions, and they were happy to respond because everybody got to benefit from those answers. And what I love with my podcast is I love to be able to give away so much information. My podcast focuses on giving away free worksheets, free ideology, free training, and free sales training to people that are wanting to be business coaches or wanting to be better business coaches. That's why it's called the Better Business Coach. However, what I've also found, and it's been an absolute delight for me, is that so many business owners who can't afford business coaching just yet are learning the strategies, using the worksheets, and I'm getting emails all the time saying, I implemented this and this really worked, or I've got a question about this and I'd really appreciate an answer on one of the forums. And for me to feel that I can give back in a way that a lot of people gave to me when I was very young, it's the best thing in the world for me. And while I love working with people on rapid growth, which is predominantly niche marketing, unification of message, niche marketing and sales systemization, I love the fact that I can give away all the principles that most people pay $20,000, $30,000 for a business coaching franchise for, or several hundred, if not thousands of dollars for professional business coaching, when they just can't afford it right now. I mean, obviously, I always suggest people get a mentor or get a business coach later down the track when they can afford it. But if it means not eating this week, I love the fact that I can get them halfway there and make them be able to afford business coaching before they have to take that step.
And that's such powerful marketing advice, because I love that philosophy of helping people and leading with generosity and delivering value first, because when they get out of their depth, or when they've got enough money to afford professional marketing advice or sales advice or business coaching, then of course you're going to be the first person they think of and engage, because you've been the person who's been delivering tons and tons of value as they've gone on this journey from the start.
Look, one of the things that I find as well is that a lot of people will say, well, if I'm going to give away all of this free content, why would somebody actually pay me? And that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of people that are starting podcasts ask. And I find that it's actually the opposite, because the more content you give away, the more content you seem to have, because one thing bounces to the next, and then you have a great guest on, and then their content merges with yours and you learn and grow throughout it. But one of the other things that I generally suggest to people that are trying to find a mentor is that if there's no free content out there and all of their content is paid for, well, firstly, you don't have a chance to test, try, and see whether or not that actually works for you. But the second thing is that they probably don't have a lot of content that's going to take you along the way, because people that have built multi-million dollar businesses generally have a huge number of templates and principles that they've learned across the way. People that haven't generally have 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I totally agree. Like, the bigger your body of work, especially the free work, then it's just a success leaves clues and signals, I believe. And if you've got lots of free content that's valuable, then that's the best way to demonstrate that your even more expensive premium stuff is going to deliver value. Whereas if you find somebody who's got no body of work at all, or they're putting it all behind a paywall, then I find that a bit hard to believe that they've got the goods.
Yeah, look, it's a hard thing to believe that you're going to get real value if you haven't experienced real value. And I think people have changed their purchasing behavior these days. I know a good friend of mine, John McIntyre, who's got a very successful podcast called The McMethod, and he talks about having in your email sequence a really, really great tip that's going to change the way they do business or create a huge amount of value straight away. And that's just a giveaway before they even come close to coming to any of your paid content. And the reason why you do that is to prove that you are going to be able to offer them ridiculous value, that even this small thing that didn't matter, you gave it away for free, offered huge value. And I think people have come to expect that these days. If they don't get real value from some of your free content, then why would they ever start to look for you as a mentor in the future? Because they like to believe that their mentors are good-hearted. People these days are becoming a lot more socially conscious. And if they don't believe that you're actually active in the market, successful in your own right, and a wealth of knowledge, then they'll go somewhere else, because there's so many other people these days that are doing that. Also, if you don't have free content, very similar to what I was talking about with differentiation and niche marketing, how could you possibly educate a specific market on what differentiates you as an expert to that specific niche that you're trying to market to?
Yeah, that's such a good point. Couldn't agree with you more. Now, Matthew, you've mentioned a lot about mentors and people that you've learnt from. Who have you learnt from over the years, either in person or via their books and blogs?
So I spent a ridiculous amount of money on personal development. And I think anybody that's in our type of industry has to, because you can't give advice to people on how to manage their day-to-day, work in their business, handle their life and emotions and stresses, or even build an online presence unless you've got specific mentors. And one of them, actually, I should say this. One of the mentors that I had when I was very, very young was a guy called Kerwin Ray. And I learned all of his sales strategies when I went to my very first seminar, which was, I think, when I was about 20. And I used his system and I used a bunch of other stuff and I bolted on. But Kerwin Ray had a wonderful question cipher that I used and it worked really, really well. So Kerwin Ray's a great one. He's in Australia, he's massive, but across the rest of the world, he's also very well known. You've also, obviously, Kerwin Ray and a guy called Tad James, because I'm very into neurolinguistic programming. And while Anthony Robbins very much focuses on a do to you kind of NLP, I also focus with Tad James, who's a do-to-yourself sort of NLP and more of an educated way of focusing on it. It's one of those things that NLP, you can work with yourself over a long period of time, where with Anthony Robbins, you sort of had to go for your fix, but gosh, it was a wonderful fix. Then you've got, for online, Pat Flynn is a phenomenal publisher of great content. And I think that his Smart Passive Income blog, I really liked that when I was first getting on the online space, because what I found is it gave me such a diverse set of information. It was one of those shows that I could really get on to find the mentors, to find the information that I needed to become an expert at a rapid pace. And, you know, for somebody like myself who has worked in telecommunications, in education and online, there's such diverse industries. You've really got to become an expert at absorbing information really quickly.
So Matthew, have you got any closing thoughts or final pieces of advice or anything you'd like to get off your chest before we call this a day?
So I know that you're in a rush to hop on a surfboard, mate, so I won't delay you anymore. But I think the major piece of advice I would share is that, especially for people that haven't started yet, or for people that have a bricks and mortar business that haven't tried online, I would really suggest that they follow Robert Kiyosaki's advice, which is stop waiting for all the lights to be green. Even if you see a few red lights, believe that you'll work that out along the trail, but start taking action now towards the direction you're trying to achieve.
That's awesome you bring up Robert Kiyosaki. He was actually one of the first authors that I read that encouraged me to go out of my own way back nearly 11 years ago. Awesome advice there.
It's the first book that I recommend to everybody to read, because I think it's a great way of creating a perception of what you're not thinking of.
You're talking Rich Dad Poor Dad, I presume?
Of course, yeah. There's a series, and I'm sure you've read more than the first, but the first one is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Matthew, how can listeners connect with you? And I gather there might be something you'd like to offer our listeners.
As any good marketer would, yes. Obviously, you can find me on my website, matthewpollard.guru. You can also type in Matthew Pollard in Google. I pretty much come out 7 or 9 out of 10, wherever you are. But also you can find me on my podcast, which is betterbusinesscoachpodcast.com. And also for your listeners, I've set up a special link, which is actually the templates that I'm going to give you. I haven't even released all of them yet to my listenership. So it's a real gift. If you go to matthewpollard.guru/Blue Wire, so that's guru, not .com, then you'll be able to download 5 worksheets. So if you've got a business and perhaps you want to start business coaching yourself, like I suggested, you can use those. If you're a business coach yourself, these are templates. There's links on the gift to videos that'll explain how to use each one of them. And they're the first 5 sessions that I suggest you use with any paid client. So they're huge value. And there's actually one of those templates, which is the worksheet that I use to translate a prospect in the first session into a paid client.
Awesome, Matthew. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming on the show. You have yourself a great day.
Thanks very much, mate. I appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for my chat with Matthew Pollard. Don't forget to head to his website, matthewpollard.guru/Blue Wire, and you can get your hands on all of his goodies there. Some of the stuff I really enjoyed about his show was just that reminder that you can learn anything you want on YouTube, whether it's marketing or business or cooking or surfing or learning to do whatever, knit, play golf. I mean, there's just so much information that people publish on there for free. It is the perfect place to start. And of course, you can listen to presentations from all the big marketing legends or business coaches, your Seth Godins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Jim Collins, all these massive names. Many of their keynote presentations are available online for free. Just look for it on YouTube. You can save yourself thousands of dollars that it costs to see them live. You can learn technical how-to stuff, as nitty-gritty as it gets, whether you're stuck on YouTube or in WordPress or in your podcast editing software. It doesn't matter. There's somebody who has been faced with that challenge in the past and they've learned how to solve it, and you can look it up on YouTube and someone will teach you very often visually, like step by step through a website, how to solve it. So if you're starting out and you are worried that you don't have the right mentors or you can't afford the right training, it's all available online for free. So get stuck into it. Now, the reason people do pay money, firstly for online courses or programs, is because the information is actually presented in a logical format that's very easy to follow. And very often the person who created the course has gone through all that trial and error of looking for the right information, testing it out, seeing what actually works the best. But if you've got time and not much money, then all that information is available to you for free. You've just got to synthesize it all and work your way through it. Whereas some people further down their business and marketing journey are prepared to pay people because they've done that synthesizing already. Now, the second piece of information that I really liked on Matthew's show was really just his list of people that he recommended, that he's learnt from. Of course, we've got Dan Norris, another fellow Aussie, the WP Curve co-founder and author of the 7-Day Startup, and a new book coming out soon called Content Machine. Matt also spoke about John McIntyre, who hosts a very popular email marketing podcast, Kerwin Ray, who's another Aussie, Pat Flynn and his Smart Passive Income podcast, all very good people to be following, and a person that I hadn't heard of yet, Tad James. So I will be looking him up and following his work. So that is what Matthew has to share with us today. So don't forget, head to his website, matthewpollard.guru/bluewiremedia. As for our material, if you like the show, you can get your hands on our templates, the 33 free marketing templates from our book, which is called Web Marketing That Works. The website for that is bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Of course, Toby and I, when we host these shows, we want to deliver actionable advice, whether it's from ourselves or from our special guests. So your feedback is always welcome. My email is adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au and always on Twitter, so @Franklin_Adam. Now, if you enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, I'd love it if you could take the time. I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but if you could take the time to please leave us a review on iTunes. It certainly helps our visibility in the iTunes search engine, which means we can get good quality guests on the show. So with that, I just want to thank you for listening all the way to the end, and I will see you on the next show. Cheers.